All right, anybody out there besides, what do you say, Harvey, Steve? We'll hopefully get you on soon. All right, I'm going to start us with the learning sponsors and what I have, and then we'll go into the daf. Okay? But just a quick reminder, by the way, that if you don't have Gemara Rosh Hashanah, or you need to access in about another week or so, okay? We're going to be finishing up Beitza and starting Rosh Hashanah, right? At least that's the calendar that I have as of the 11th of October, right? Okay, we'll have a combination Siyum and birthday party for Zev. How's that? Okay.
All right. Have to bring a cake.
No.
Zev, you were born?
I was born on the 15th,
Oh, wow, we have something coming.
but
Huh?
no, it was, my birthday in Hebrew was Aleph Kashua, which is it's around the 11th, isn't it?
Yeah. That's Aleph Cheshvan would be, actually, it's at the 7th of October this year. Right? That's why I said we'll do that. Okay, a year of learning. Sue and Arnie Gerlich in memory of Malka Proman and Philip Man and Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Hanya Rivka Pro Rosna bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch. In the memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Marcia Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avrameir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Chana bat Yeshaya. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Malka Levy, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. A Month of Learning by Lynn Rappaport, in memory of her husband Avram ben Sion HaKohen, and Ron and Susan Podolsky, in memory of his father Tzvi ben Pinchas. A Week of Learning by Ari and Judy Cohen, in memory of his mother Fega bas Yechiel and her mother Hinda bat Moshe Zechariah Halevi. And that is it that I have. Shemus Heaven Aliyah, Crank Rafir, Velti Yeshua Shem Latliya, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, good bench.
Amen.
Oh, Steve, good morning. Okay, so the question is, where do we start this morning? Let's go to Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, top of the Amud, Matnitin, a new Mishnah. Okay? Remember, we've said that because Ochel Nefesh is permitted on Yom Tov, and therefore some raise the question about Machshirei Ochel Nefesh, what preparations are necessary for food. To what degree does that concept expanded in terms of other kinds of behaviors? Okay? We saw already Mishnayos that had told us, what about things like gathering wood? Or what about things like other issues, like transporting items that might be needed for a meal? Okay, the example of getting things from a storehouse, storeroom, things of that nature. Okay, would these items be acceptable? So our new Mishnah is, since we the previous Mishnah touched on taking wood from a hut, okay, but not a Purim sukkah, okay. What about preparing wood? After all, we could argue if we have to heat up the food, we needed wood, right, to put in the wherever, okay, fireplace, whatever. Can you go out and cut wood to be able to get the kindling, okay, or get wood to heat up the food, etc., etc. So keeping that in mind, we'll now on Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, from the top of the Amud, the following Mishnah. Mevi'in etzim min hasadeh. One can bring wood, okay, from an unfenced field. You're going to see why but, says the Mishnah, min hamechunas. But that wood needs to be gathered before Yom Tov. Okay. However, umina karpef, but from an enclosed area, okay, say you have a pasture that's enclosed, right? Afilu min hamefuzar. There, that could be even individual pieces of twigs and wood could be collected. Ezahu karpaf, says the Mishnah. What do we mean by an enclosed area? Kol shesamuch la'ir, divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that it must be fairly close to the city. Right? Rabbi Yossi Omer, he disagrees and says, Kol shenichnasin lo b'potachat, that it's an enclosed area and therefore he must be able to enter it by use of a key. Va'afilu b'toch tchum Shabbat. And so long, says Rabbi Yossi, his second qualification, I'm saying, is that it must be within the Tchum Shabbos of the community. Okay? So as we continue with the Gemara.
With the key would mean it's his field.
Well, it would imply that that could be an option. Okay? Maybe it's a jointly owned field. Okay, you and I own the field and we share. We each have a key. Okay? Right? Or maybe the question might be, what if the Jew and a Gentile shared a field? Okay, which would be a possible option in Bavel, clearly. Okay, things like that.
Is it saying that if it's within the Chum Shabbos, that means you can do it on Shabbos?
I don't think so.
Can't put it on the fire.
Okay, first of all, why would you have need to collect firewood on Shabbos? Right? But
they may collect other things.
Okay, but so I would say that in this case, that would not apply to Shabbos, but applying to use of wood for Yom Tov. Okay, but notice the difference. Okay, the Gemara is now going to say, is this really what the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi is all about? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. He's giving an explanation, right? Ein mevi'in etzim ela min hamechunasin shebekarpa. According to Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, you can only bring in wood that is already pre-gathered inside an enclosed area. So he's certainly even more stringent, right, than the Rabbi Yehuda cited in the Mishnah. Okay? What happens though? V'ha'anantanan, says the Gemara, we challenge Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, but we learned, he says in a Mishnah, min hakarpaf, from the enclosure, v'afilu min hamafuzarim, even if they were pieces of wood were spread around. Matnitin yichidahi. And the Gemara tells us, no, that particular, it would appear then that our Mishnah is of an individual's opinion. Okay? Tanya, as we learn in a Braita, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, he says as follows, Lo nechlaku Beit Shammai u Beit Hillel. There was no argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel al hamafuzarin shebesadot she'ein mevi'in, on wood that's spread out in an open field, right, an unfenced field, that one can't bring it in. Va'al hamechunasin shebekarpaf shemavi'im, or about wood that is gathered in an existing enclosure that it can be brought in. Alma nechlaku, what did they then argue about? Al hamefuzarin shebekarpaf, on wood that is spread around in an enclosure. Va'al hamechunasin shebesadot, and on wood that has already been gathered in open fields, in unfenced fields. Shebeit Shammai omrim lo yavi. Beit Shammai says one cannot bring either of those examples in. Ubeit Hillel omrim yavi, and Beit Hillel says one can bring it in. Right? So that seems to be another issue. Okay, so we now continue. Amar Rava, says Rava, give another example. Ale kinim, leaves from reeds. Va'ale gfanim, and leaves from vines. Afal gav demechan feilaho umotve, even though we might say they could be gathered and motve sitting, in other words, waiting there in a pile of leaves. Kevan de imadle zika, mevarer, mevader laho. Okay, since it's possible that a wind will come and blow them away and separate them, kimafuzarim damu, that they are like the wood that is spread out, va'asurim, and therefore forbidden. Okay? So we see what was used as either kindling or things like that, okay? And what the problem is. Ve'i atnach mana me etmo, says the Gemara. But I'm suggesting that this is actually, could be a further statement, right? By Rava, okay? And if one places a utensil on top of that pile of reed leaves or vine leaves from the day before, Alaihu Shapir Dami, then it's well done. Okay, then that's acceptable. Because by placing something on it, the wind can't blow them and scatter them. And as a result, they're like gathered, like mechunasim. Okay? Now, Gemara is going to continue, however. Ezehu karpa fechule. What about this question of what is the difference between what is an enclosed area, right? Ibayalahu. So there was a problem that was asked the Chachamim. Heichi kamar, what's being said here? Kol shesamuch la'ir, v'hu de'it le potachet. Are we saying really that this machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi is really a machloket? This is how I'm suggesting it. Or is Rabbi Yossi really trying to clarify what Rabbi Yehuda was saying? Okay? In other words, and notice, because we said Rabbi Yossi seems to be positing two different elements. One, the necessity for a key, and one for the necessity of it being in Tchum Shabbos. Okay? Well, certainly, if it's Samuch La'ir, it's got to be within Tchum Shabbos, right? So it may be that he's simply not necessarily disagreeing, but explaining and clarifying. So that's what the Gemara, I suggest, is asking here.
Or does it have to be near the city with a key or without a key?
That is the question that the Gemara is now asking, right? That was asked by the sages. Kol shesamuch la'ir v'hu de'it le potachet. Is that what it's saying? That it's got to be near the city and include the use of a key? Va'ata Rabbi Yossi Lamema, and Rabbi Yossi therefore comes to say, Kevan de'itle potachet, that once if you have a key, afilu b'toch tchum Shabbat nami, then even if it's not just close to the city, but also within the tchum Shabbos, it's a viable. O Dilma, or perhaps this is what Rabbi Yossi is saying. Hachi kama. This is what he means to say. Kol shesamuch la'ir, that which is close to the city, bein de'itle potachet, bein delitle potachet, whether he has a key or doesn't have a key. Va'ata Rabbi Yossi, and then Rabbi Yossi adds the Meimar afilu b'toch tchum Shabbos, and also within the tchum of Shabbos, v'dafka de'itle potachet, and there especially one must have a key. Aval litle potachet, but if he doesn't have a key in that situation, afilu samuch la'ir nami lo, then would we say that even if it's close to the city, that would not be viable? Tashma, says the Gemara, Labriut. Listen to the following Brighton. Midikatani Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol shenichnasin lo bepotachet, va'afilu b'toch tchum Shabbat. Since our Mishnah taught that Rabbi Yossi said that anyone that is able to enter it with the use of a key, and also, right, that it is within the Tchum Shabbos, Shmamina, we learn from this, Rabbi Yossi tarte lekula ka'amar, Shmamina. So we're saying that Rabbi Yossi here gives us two examples of leniencies, right? Because what it means is, number one, greater leniency in the area in which you could go and gather the wood. And number two, leniency is the fact that you have easy accessibility to that enclosure. Okay?
So the key, does it have to be his key?
Doesn't say, right? That's when I said maybe it's a shituf, the enclosure. Maybe it's owned by two people and they share a key. Okay, right? We'll see if the Gemara addresses that. I don't think it does. Right? The assumption could be, and I didn't look at Rashi, okay, that it could be his key. Right? Shmamin. But that's what we say. Amar Rav Salah, he says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. In the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, Halakha Rabbi Yossi Lahakir. Okay, and here we say clearly that it's a leniency, according to Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so we see here then there for that. Okay, the general item is that if you have the key, you could even go into the enclosure and gather scattered wood and bring it and collect that. Okay. Now, since we've been talking wood, we continue in the next Mishnah, right? Ein mev'akin eitzim lo min hakorot. We are not able to chop wood from beams. V'lo min hakorah shenishbara b'yom tov, and not from a beam, all right, that has been broken on Yom Tov. Ve'ein mevakin lo b'kardom, and we can't chop with a axe, right? And this is really a two-bladed axe, okay? The Koran actually has a picture of the kind as a Roman axe where one end is wide, okay, and the other end is more pointed. Okay? Sometimes the point is even, sometimes the point is curved down. Okay, but
why would it make a difference?
What, the shape of the
Type
axe?
axe?
No, it's not what the style of the axe is. The point is that this kind of utensil was the common everyday utensil that was used for chopping, for furrowing. In other words, it was like, I'm trying to think of an example. It was like two utensils in one. Okay, well, that's got multiple. Okay, right? So that's it. It was a common Roman utensil. Okay, velo b'magera, and not with a saw. Velo b'magal, and not with a sickle. Okay, so these were all common items. Okay, particularly that had at least one side was a sharp blade. Okay, that would probably, if you're taking not the huge, not, let's say not a 2x4, okay, but maybe if you had like a 1x2, okay, something like that, that could maybe with a good knack, right? You could break it, okay? Chop it. Elebikofitz, but you could use a meat cleaver. Okay? Why? Because that was not the common utensil used ordinarily to chop wood. Yes. Okay. And we've seen now in the Gemara that question of effort, good comment, Marty, okay, raises an issue. Right? So let's go on now with the Gemara. That's exactly that, right? They don't want it to look like Uvdei Dechol. Okay? That's why we.
You don't want to increase the effort.
What?
You don't want to increase.
But that's the flip side, right? So you've got to come up with a balance. Both everybody's good. That balance between how do you make it not look like a normal weekday activity? It's got to be a shinui.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's too much of a shinui, like we saw in yesterday's Gemara, where Rav Ashi was saying, well, you want him to do this, look what happens. You want him to do that, look what happens. Back and forth. They gave a half a dozen different examples. Okay, that all would, many of them would result in extra exertion. Exactly. Okay.
The word here is only with, which is the-
Only, that's interesting. Koren didn't phrase it that way. All right. Okay, but now what happens? Let's go on to the top of the Amud. And it says, Vaha Amar, but didn't you say Resha at the beginning of the Mishnah? Resha ein mevakin klal, that one should not chop at all. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, he says as follows: Kasuri michsara v'hachi katani. Something's missing in our text, and this is how we have to teach it. Ein mevakin min hasoar shel korot. We do not chop, okay, from a stack of beams. V'lo min hakoresh nishbara b'yom tov, and not from a beam that got broken on Yom Tov. Aval mevakin min hakoresh nishbara me'erev Yom Tov. But we can chop a beam, okay, that had gotten broken on the eve, the day before of Yom Tov. Ukeshehein mevakin, and when they do chop, ein mevakin lo b'kardom, we cannot chop then with an axe, a two-sided axe, v'lo b'magal, and not with a saw, v'lo b'magera, not with a sickle, ela b'kofitz, but with a cleaver. Tanya nami hachi, and we have a braita that teaches this as well. Ein mevakin etzim lo min hasoar shel korot. We do not chop wood from a stack of beams, lo min hakoresh nishbara b'yom tov, and not from a beam that broke on Yom Tov. Lafi she'eino min hamuchan, because it is not prepared, it's not available in advance of Yom Tov. So going into now the utensil, v'lo b'kardom, and not with a double-sided axe. Amar Rav Chinina bar Shlomia, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav. Lo shanu ela b'nekevot. We're talking there that he can't use that's called the female side, the wider or the broad side of the axe. Okay, that's the one we said that the head of the axe is spread, right? And like I said, Corin had good pictures. Shelo. Aval bezachrut, but with the male or the narrow or thin side, shelo mutar. There it's permitted, right? So I don't know if, well, okay. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Bekofitz tnan. Our Mishnah taught it had to be done with a cleaver, right? Mahu detema. What are you then trying to tell us? He said, Hani mili kofitz lechude. This would seem to be using a cleaver alone. Aval kardom v'kofitz. But if he used an axe and a cleaver, ema migo da hai gisa asur, hai gisa nami asur. It's possible, I might think, since one side of the axe is prohibited, the other side of the axe is prohibited. Kamash malan comes to teach us that that's not the case. Ve'ikedematne la asef. And there are those who taught this on the end part of our statement. Ela bekofitz, when it's said only with a cleaver. Amav Rav Chinina bar Shalmia Mishmei de Rav, he says in Rav's name, Lo shanu ela bezachrut shalom. We were only talking about the narrow side, the thin side of the axe. Aval b'nekivot shalom, but in the female, broader, wide side of the axe, asur, it's prohibited. Shita, isn't that obvious? Velo b'kardom tana, because it doesn't teach that you can use an axe. Mahu detema, what then is it trying to tell us? Hani mili b'kardom. This refers to the use of the axe. Aval kofitz v'kardom, but using a cleaver and an axe, ema migo da hai gisa shari. I might have thought that since one side is permitted, hai gisa nami shari, the other side is also permitted. Kamash malan comes to teach us that that's not the case. Okay, now we're going into a new topic with this next mission. Okay, I want to come back and connect it to what we saw before. Remember our first Mishnah in this parak talked about bringing pitchers of wine, okay, from a storage area into the house. Okay? And it raised that question that you could only do it by means of a shinui. Right? So we see here that huts, abodes, small houses were used for storage. Excuse me. And so that's what we're getting to now here in this Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Bayit, Shehu Malei Perot. So we have a house that's really used as a storehouse, right? And it's full of produce. What about it? V'nifchat, and there's been breached a hole into this house. Notel mimakom haperchat. Okay, we can remove from the place of the hole, of the breach. Rabbi Meir Omer, af pochet lechatchila v'notel. And Rabbi Meir says we can even make the breach lechatchila, initio, at the outset, and then remove the produce. Gemara Amai,
You don't need the key.
it's a different issue, right? Okay, because I could argue, right? Maybe I don't have enough foodstuffs in my home, and I need to go to this storage house and get out for more stuff. But the Gemara says, Vahakasater ahala. But he's dismantling a tent. All right, that's a clear malacha that's prohibited, both on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Right? Because we said earlier in the Gemara, Ein Hevdel ben Shabbos and Yom Tov except for Ochel Nefesh. Amar Rav Nechumi Bar Ada Amar Shmuel. In the name of Shmuel, what does he say? Where is this hole? Ba'avira de Livni. It's an air pocket, an area between the bricks, okay, of the house where there's no cement. And that's why you're able to reach your hand in, okay? Aini, is that the case, is the Gemara? V'ha'amar Rav Nachman, but didn't Rav Nachman say, Hani livnei de'itur mebenyana? If you have bricks that are left over for building, shari v'tiltulunhu b'shavta, it's permitted to move them on Shabbos, ho'il v'chaze v'mizga alai, because it's permitted to, they're suitable to sit on them. Okay, I like to think of this as like, almost like our use of cement blocks. Okay, think of the size of a cement block. That, I don't know if that was the case back then, but certainly a quote brick that size would certainly be available for somebody to sit on. Okay, right? So what happens? Sharginhu, but if you pile them up, vadai aktsinhu, they are certainly set aside for some other purpose and therefore not movable. Okay. Amar Rabbi Zera, he says, Biyom Tov Amru. That's what we were saying in regards to Yom Tov, that it would be one thing. Avalo b'Shabbat, but not on Shabbos. Tanya Nami Hachi, and we have a Braita that teaches this as well. Rabbi Meir Omer, he says as follows: Af pochet lechatchila v'notel b'yom tov, that one can make the hole initially and then remove the food stuff on Yom Tov. Amru aval lo b'Shabbat, and the Braita said, they told him, but doesn't apply to Shabbos.
Isn't that similar where you go to a storekeeper and ask the storekeeper to open the store and give you something? You can do that on Yom Tov.
Well, apparently in the time of the Gemara, that was very common. Right? We saw that. That came up the other day. I remember I kibitzed the Mesh about that. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel, however, now is going to give us a new statement. Okay. Now, how were these houses or huts, how were they kept on the ground, right? Right, or how were these roofs kept on, right? The same way we know that having sukkahs, we have lines, wire, rope, right? That we tie the sukkah down and attach it to pegs in the ground. So keep that image in mind, okay? And we see here the following. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Chotamot shebakarka, those knots that are tied as fasteners, okay, to keep the storehouse or the roof or whatever proper, that are attached to the ground, matir, one can untie them, aval lo mafkia, but you can't unravel the rope, velo chotech, and you can't cut the rope, right? Shebekelim, if you have ropes, knots that keep utensils, right? Matir, those one can untie, umafkia, and unravel, v'chotech, and cut, echad Shabbat ve'echad Yom Tov, whether on Shabbos or Yom Tov, because that's not considered a malacha on Shabbos or Yom Tov. The Gemara challenges Meitive, chotamot shebekarka, those items knots that are tied as fasteners to the ground. B'Shabbat, regarding Shabbat, matir avalo mafkia v'lo chotech. We say it's permissible to untie them, but not to unravel them and not to cut them. B'Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, matir umafkia v'chotech, that it's permissible to untie and to unravel and to cut. Hamani, according to whom is that? Rabbi Meir he. It seems to be according to Rabbi Meir. The Amar af pochet lechatchila v'noteim, because he said one could actually make the hole initially, okay, and then reach in and take the foodstuffs. Upligi rabbananale, and the rabbis disagree with him. Va'ana da amrei k'rabbanan, and I say according to the rabbis. Umi plige rabbananale v'chotamot shebekarka, and do the rabbis really argue with him regarding these knotted fasteners to the ground? Vahatanya, and aren't we taught elsewhere in a bright? Excuse me. Modim chachamim Rabbi Meir, that the sages acknowledged to Rabbi Meir, v'chotamot shebekarka shebeshabbat matir, that those knotted fasteners holding it to the ground can be untied on Shabbos. Avalo mafkia v'lo chotech, but one cannot unravel them and not cut them. B'Yom Tov, on regards to a holiday, matir umafkia v'chotech, that one can untie, one can unravel, and one can cut them. Let's just go over a little bit.
I thought you're not allowed to untie a permanent knot. And it seems to me that if they put it on, if they tie it that way, it would be a permanent knot.
It would appear. That's a good question. Who
And where
damar?
does it deal? And where does it deal with the question of when a festival falls on the Shabbos?
Doesn't deal with that, right, Steve? And Zeva's point is this a permanent knot or not? That's not a pun, by the way. Okay. Hu Amar, and it was Shmuel who said, Ki hai Tana, this is like another Tana, the Tanya who taught in the Braita, Chotmot shebekarka matir, those knotted fasteners can be untied, aval lo mafkia v'lo chotech, echad Shabbat ve'echad Yom Tov. But one can't unravel or can't cut them either on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. Why? Bekli, but whereas for a utensil, the Shabbat matir, aval lo mafkia v'lo chotech. But on Shabbos you can untie them, but you can't unravel or cut them. B'Yom Tov, on Yom Tov matir, one can untie them, umafkia v'choteh. One can, right? Yom Tov, one can untie, one can unravel, and one can cut. So the Gemara then says, Tart Satan, lach reish, you explained and gave an answer for the opening part, the earlier part, ela seifa kasha. Okay, but for the end part of our Mishnah, it's problematic. And we'll have to tune in tomorrow, so to speak, to come back and see what the answer is. Okay? All right. Because the
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, all right? Okay, finish up. And then it's going to give to a whole nother example, another topic. All right. So everybody have a good Shabbos. And let's